on this side, on the east side of it,
Sorry to interrupt. If you wouldn't mind just kind of putting this on your
Oh, yeah.
shirt somewhere, that would be great.
Okay. Will that noise come out on your machine there
Yeah.
when I talk? No, I mean
it
now.
will. It's going directly into the camera
Oh.
that I've set up there. So
Okay.
yeah. I think that's pretty good to get started.
Are we ready? Okay.
Yeah. Let me start your PowerPoint though. So
It's good.
yeah. Now it's bigger.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll do it like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We're so glad that you're here for Herb Reckinger, talking about all things Rock Island Bridge. My name is Emily Krafcheski. As some of you know, I'm the site manager here at the Heritage Center. We are open Tuesday through Saturday. Come by anytime and visit us or become a member. The next event that we have is, well, there's two upcoming ones that I want to mention. One is Angie Hong. She is a naturalist and scientist in this area, botanist. Everything about the natural world, she does it. And she is going to be here on September 10th. That's a Tuesday. And that's a free event as well. And she's going to be talking about her book, Exploring the St. Croix River, and that is in our shop. And then after that, we have the one, the only, Mr. George Shire. He's going to be talking about AWA. Remind me of the exact title.
AWA, professional.
Perfect. Villains, right?
All the villains.
All the villains. So all the bad boys. We're going to be talking about them, the heels. And that's going to be on September 12th at 6 p.m. So don't come at 7. You'll miss half of it. Come at 6 p.m. So just some things to put on your calendar to look forward to. And again, we're very... It works though. So anyway, so I'm going to turn things over to Herb to talk about the Rock Island Bridge.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks, Emily and Brent. I'm joined today by my wife, Nancy, my friend, Denise. Okay, and if you have any questions about the bridge, you can ask me. If you got questions about me, ask Nancy. Okay. So anyway, I'm just going to introduce you to the bridge here with this, these words up here with the years of the bridge and the different names it had. And it probably had more names than that. But it had, some people called it the St. Paul Park Bridge, the Inver Grove Bridge, the Rock Island Bridge, the JAR Bridge. Those were the toll takers of the 80s. And most of us just called it the Old Bridge. Most of the time it depended what town you lived in. If you're Inver Grove or South St. Paul, you might have said Inver Grove Bridge. On the other side of the bridge, when you came off the east end of that bridge, you had to go left or right. Left was north into Newport, and staying straight and south was into St. Paul Park. So it had those different names. Here's a very much romanticized picture of the old bridge. I'm probably going to call it the Old Bridge most of the way. You can see the crash barriers drawn in down below here. This is like a big pencil sketch of the old days. It's called Bridge 56 over the Mississippi. It's so romanticized. They got a deer down here. And if you look up on the engine there, they got antlers on the front of it. Okay? But that is a logo for our little historical society, the South Washington Heritage Society. That's in our logo stuff. So pretty neat. Now you can see the construction began in 1894. And this photo was taken from our side of the river. When I say our side, I mean Washington County. Okay, Dakota County, Inver Grove is the other side. It was built by Pittsburgh Bridge. And that is some kind of machine. I can see gears on it and wheels and stuff. And you can tell that the tracks aren't done yet. There's no wiring up there. Of course, there wouldn't have been. I don't think we didn't have electricity back then. Electricity didn't come to the Jansen farm till about 1930 in Cottage Grove. So it was a while before we'd even get electricity there. It was a very unique bridge. Okay, there's where the trains went. This wasn't suspension. This was a car deck. It built an automobile deck in 1894. And you can see the tender shack right here. I would say this picture probably dates from the 40s, but there you get an idea of what that bridge was like. It had a car deck. It became a car deck. It wasn't intended for that. We had no cars in 1890s buzzing around. So in the 1900s, we got our first cars. and I'll tell you the dimensions of it as we get into it. So in the next photo, you'll see the completion of it here. And up at the top here, they stamped into the plate 1894. So that's some months before the spiral bridge opened in Hastings. Okay. Completion, yeah, you see a bunch of guys, you can tell it's not our era. And just the way you can't see any background, I can't tell. That was on both ends of the bridge, so I don't know if it was on the Washington or Dakota County side. There you can see a car stopped along the bridge tender. Who was a bridge tender? He's the guy that operated the handles when a barge came, or big boat. Okay. And that is looking towards Inver Grove. The shack was on the south side of the bridge, so it was a shorter distance from our end of the bridge to the far end of the bridge. And you'll see that a little later. What brought this old bridge apart? What brought it on? There's the answer right there. Swift and Company. Okay, it started out as a Fowler company. And in the 1890s, it became Swift and Company. But at one time, they estimated, this was stockyards. This is beef, cattle, and sheep processing. But at one time, they figured that the trains running by, the main lines out here, that would have been the Milwaukee Road and the Chicago, Burlington, Quincy, that the cattle going to the Chicago stockyards equaled the amount of processed beef that came back to the Minnesota area. Let's take hundreds of miles off that and build our own plants in the Twin Cities. So they built them on the shores of the Mississippi. And of course, right across here in time, we would have Cudahy's. That was Newport's version of the stockyards, but it came later. It was smaller. Armour's isn't even here yet. Armour's was here along the river. Okay, they spawned a what do you call it? A malt for beer. Charlie Hauser's Malt House. My great grandpa, Nick Reckinger, immigrated here in 1899, and that's where he went to work. That's where he worked over in Germany. That's where he worked when he came here. It was right between the two plants. And here are the stockyards where all the cattle, sheep, and pigs were brought in. I lived into the age of, I don't know about sheep, but I know I lived in the age of cattle and pigs coming by rail. I was born in 52. I'm not 100, but I'm getting there. Okay. Now you can see another industry. And what we're doing is, this was taken up in the air years ago. The Mississippi is in flood. This Bottoms Island is flooded. But that's looking southeast towards the refinery. It's in the 40s. The refinery was built in 39, first refinery in our state. And there's no cat cracker here. Don't laugh about cat cracker. That was a part of the process in the refinery. And no reformers, no alky units. It's not alcohol, it's alkylate unit, okay? They made premium gas products. But anyway, you can see the bridge. Here's the crash barriers. They are surrounded by wood. That's to keep barges. You'll see that at any old bridge like that. You had to have a crash barrier. When barges would come up, they'd miss it a little bit. They could take that thing out. If you move that turntable an inch or two, it's done. You have to start over. So they couldn't afford that. If there was anything else, you can almost count the piers here that we'll get back to later. 1, 2, 3, 4. There was 5 spans here and a number of them here. You can see how close together they were here, and they were much smaller. Okay, they were, if you can see them, this was limestone here. It's this stuff. I don't know how the river didn't erode it in time, but this is what was used. This is what the bridge sat on. How deep was the river back then? You couldn't just put it at the 9 feet at the bottom of the river. You had to go down to bedrock. This channel here from Lafayette Bridge to Pine Bend is twice carved by a glacial river. So the depth bedrock here is 150 to 200 feet. That's how deep they had to go down to get a firm enough footings for all of these. And probably some of these, it might have got a little shallower here, but just because you're on land doesn't mean it's it's lesser than 150 or 200 feet. That's Prairie du Chien limestone. Okay. And there's a picture taken from our side of the river looking towards Inver Grove. And if you looked at either picture, there aren't many homes around there, is there? It's just solid now, both sides of the river. The refinery got a little bit bigger. Here they put in their admin office. That got torn down 20 years ago, probably. That's a repeat of the picture that I showed you before. One of my mistakes. Here's the toll bridge. There's nothing over 30 cents there. And I think that'd be like a whole herd of cattle. But I could see some of them. Maybe I wrote some of them down. Okay, these were the tolls until 1938. It's the only toll bridge in the state. Cars were 30 cents. Riders in a car were 5 cents. A horse and wagon was 10 cents. Riders on a horse and wagon were 3 cents. So you got over that bridge cheaper if you're on a horse. And you could see all kinds of other ones here, and you'll see other examples here in our slides here. When you make a picture bigger, you lose a lot of that resolution, you lose a lot of that focus. But if you study that long enough, you can tell what most of it said here. Like purser or cattle, you know, I can read some of the words, but. Okay, does anybody know the name of the Rock Island passenger line? The Rocket. Okay, it's called the Rocket. And that's a trail end of a train going over the bridge. So it's 1, 2, 3, probably 3 engines worth. You know, the Amtrak today has about 10, 11, 12 cars. That's going from coast to coast. But, you know, all these little rail companies had those, had their individual names for their passenger rails. Hereabout is where the 1894 is, and it was on both ends. The one on this end is still in existence. We'll see that later. And here you can see the wires going out to it. Now that's in more recent times. The refinery has grown tremendously. This up here in the front is a cat cracker. The fluid catalytic cracking plant. They can take like some of the heaviest stuff in a barrel of crude oil, turn it into gasoline. I hope whoever invented that, I hope his family is all very wealthy now. They did a great thing. But this is the Inver Grove Marina here. This is before any of the demolition took place. This is on the Inver Grove side. This is how you approached it from down below. Okay, and it's actually a raised bed that goes up to go across. The rail bed was raised. What I mean is the approach to it. And when you came off this end of the bridge, you either wide south into further into Inver Grove and Rosemont and stuff, or you went north into Inver Grove and South St. Paul. And it was shallow. I'm trying to make sure that I wrote all these distances for you, but I'll get into that right now. Okay, this bridge was 18 feet wide. It was made in 1894 before cars. You got 2 cars that are 6 feet wide. They might have been wider back then. That's 12 feet. You got 6 feet left. That's 2 feet on this side, 2 feet up the middle, and 2 feet on the right side. You paid attention when you went across that bridge. It could be scary at times, especially when you're a kid. Okay, there's more of it. This is all from the Inver Grove side. Can I tell what number I'm on here? Oh yeah, I'm on 16. Okay, I haven't missed too much here. Okay, so the Inver Grove approach here, from until 1980, the Rock Island Rail Line bankrupted to the Chicago Northwestern. So when the bridge was built, it was owned by the South St. Paul Beltline Transitway to get these cattle over to the lines of those other 2 railroads I mentioned. And they had to what do I have it here? So Rock Island took it over in the late 1890s and held it until 1980. And then the bridge closed for 2 years. And then 2 years later, then these Joan and Al Roman from Chicago bought the bridge and they made it back into a toll. The tolls quit in 38 originally. So from 38 to 80, there was no tolls then. In 82, when it reopened, it was still it became a toll bridge once again. Okay, I got a couple of good things to read to you. This is from a toll taker. So when you paid this toll, it's in this one with the bridges. Some of the things that could happen when you're a toll taker. Trusting toll taker. In 1988, Henry Miller, the toll taker, recalled the strangest of many happenings on the bridge. A woman who didn't have the 75-cent toll proceeded to leave her shirt and brassiere as a deposit in lieu of the toll. Henry recalled it was a pretty hot night. That must have been why she did it. She returned to pay the toll and retrieve her clothing. So, and then I have an article. This is in today's paper down in Cottage Grove. They're starting to resurrect an old newspaper there. Also reported by Judy Spooner. A lot of us know Judy. She wrote a lot of newspaper articles down there. The 440-foot swing bridge in St. Paul Park was to celebrate 100 years during Heritage Days. Bought by Al Roman and operated as a private toll bridge after the Rock Island Railroad had gone bankrupt in '82. The bridge was originally steam-driven and swinging on 54 rollers via gear and shaft as of 1994. Famous stories associated with the bridge's railroad days included John Dillinger escaping across it, a story confirmed by Newport resident and future Mayor Basil Loveland. You've heard of him, Brent, huh? Loveland. According to Loveland, his brother-in-law's father had been flying out a field and saw police cars chasing Dillinger. The railroad was replaced by a roadbed in '79. Well, I've heard a few other stories about Dillinger too. And the policemen would follow him, but they'd never follow him too close. Okay. So we'll move on here. This is more of the bridge. You can see this is probably getting before the demo. The top rails are going. I don't know if we saw it in one of these. Maybe it's in one of the next ones. The lights that would blink and stop you are gone. Okay, so it's right at the end. I want to go back to 16. I'm in 20 already. Whoop, going the wrong way. Going back to 16. So the Wakota Bridge, the 494 bridge, was built in '59. And I could tell it was going to be pretty close. I worked at that refinery till 2010. I thought it's going to be close. Which bridge is going to survive longer? The one built in the 1800s or the one built in 1959? This old bridge was up 3 years longer than the Wakota Bridge. Okay, so I was pulling for the swing bridge. You can see the missing side rails. My own early memories, I'm probably 4 or 5. My dad would take us out on rides, and he'd go across that with us in the back seat. And the first time a train went overhead, we were ducking. Okay? And I used to have a recurring nightmare when I was a kid. You ever have the same dream when you're sick? And I dreamt that my dad was taking us across and the deck just slowly went into the water. And I could wake myself up before we drowned. Okay? And my mother would take me and my 2 brothers, before my sisters were born, pick up Dolores Plan and her 2 kids, take us across there, go to Connie Saliga's house, and we'd play in the backyard, and they would drink coffee and smoke Chesterfield cigarettes. My mom quit in the early 60s. Okay, so okay, and you can tell there was a lot of graffiti going up on the bridge by this time, kind of like your old jail at the courthouse there. Got to look here and see. There's 19. No offense, barges. Okay, now I'll tell you another thing. You could save a lot of time going across this bridge if you lived south from there in Cottage Grove like I did, and at the south end of South St. Paul like I did until '74, until we moved over there. But it could take you a while. You'd get on this end. That's our end over here. There's a refinery. And the metal gates would go shut. The bells would come on. They'd ring the whole time. So everybody'd back up. And the barge, if it was coming from upriver, coming downstream. It'd get there quicker than it was coming from downstream. So you'd sit there and wait. People get out of their car and look at it, look over stuff, you know. And then you get back in your car, and then it wouldn't open again. You'd look, there's one coming from the south. You're about ready to shoot yourself. And then you get across a bridge, and then what had happened? You get up to Concord Street, and there'd be a Chicago Northwestern or a Rock Island train going north. So it could take half an hour, 45 minutes or more. Sometimes it was terrible. But it was worth it because you didn't get burned very often. Okay. So I worked in association with the refinery from 1966 when I was 14. I worked with my dad. He was a construction guy for Super America gas stations. That's when they were building them. I never pumped gas, but I worked when these stations went up, like the first Robert Street station in West St. Paul. So that's a lot of years, and I had a lot of years of waiting there. This is what it looked like when it was swung open. There you can see the JAR, Joan and Al Roman Bridge. And about the same time, we had a John Roman that was our plant manager. No relation. Thank God, we only needed one of them. Okay, so 20 turn. Okay, now let me tell you about the turntable. I mentioned turntable yet? Okay, this is a turntable, and you'll see a bit of it later. This thing rotated. That bridge that span, that 442 feet of the span that swung, that was in balance. It was built that way, it was maintained that way, and being in balance didn't take much of a motor to turn it. It took a gas-powered engine at first, and then it went to electricity. But I graduated with two guys, and their dads worked in the Rock Island yard in Inver Grove. And my friend Ken Day told me one time, they were both maintenance guys. They both worked in the yards. That place had a turntable in it. Not this turntable. You know what a rail turntable is? Where you can shoot cars in and, you know, turn it and lead them out. It was one of those kind of turntables. But one of the guys that was working on the bridge up here fell down into the turntable. It wasn't operating or anything, but he was really hurt bad. And Ken said, he'll never forget it. His dad came home about 11, 12 at night, totally exhausted. They got the guy out of there, but it wasn't easy because he was trapped under stuff. They had to get under there and, you know, work really hard to get him out of there. But they saved the guy, and he said his dad was really shook. So wasn't all easy work back then. The rest of the time they worked on the lines probably. So 20. Okay, so now the bridge is going to start the demo. You can see the work barges getting ready. And what they had to do, this is an 09. For the first time in about 10 years, they had to swing the bridge. You know, when it's open this way, the barges can go through either side. So they had to shut it. They had to do something with it. You know, the rails didn't lock anymore. Like the rails would be up in the air. When the bridge would open, the rails would be up in the air, and they had outer coverings on them. They had to go down over the rails on both ends once it got back. And the old, you know, it was really neat because the guy would make the bridge go back and forth. He had to be really accurate when he stopped it, you know. But it was really neat to watch that. Okay, it was closed for the first time in 10 years. Okay, then when you look here they're starting to take it apart, aren't they? And I witnessed that. I worked in the warehouse at that time of the refinery, and I'd have to walk, I don't know, a quarter mile or more down to the barge road, is what we called it, and the road was along the river here. And you could watch. They had like a pipe barge here for scrap metal, and then these guys here. And when they first started, there'd be a scrap barge and the guys working in two different barges. So they had to take it down the same way it was put up, in balance. Okay, they started at opposite corners, taking off the same structure, doing the same thing. It had to be taken down the same way, or the thing's going to crash into the river and plug the channel for who knows how long. So it's kind of incredible. Even when you're ruining something, sometimes you got to be careful. And you can see it was Vite. Anybody ever heard of Vite? They do vacuum trucks. They worked in the refinery for years. They might still be in there. But they were part of it. And of course, usually they might get to take the timbers or something when they tore down a couple of our historic buildings. They got to take the old timbers out of it, great big wooden timbers like that. If there's anything like that on this, they might have negotiated to get that stuff too. So 22. So here's what happened on the Inver Grove side. I showed you that there was 5 spans that went out between the limestone piers, the bases. Okay, they took out 5. Let's just call it 5, the one where the swing is. They took out 1 and 2. And at the same time, people were negotiating to save it. I thought, they're stupid. How can this be? You know, they already took out 1 and 2. Well, then they decided to save 2 of them. They saved 3 and 4. And I know not 1, but when 2 went out, they didn't take it apart there. They came in with a barge. They could plant it into the river and jack it up. They lifted it off, and it went up the river on the barge. And they took it apart in a yard up there. Pretty neat. See where I am here, 23. There's a good look at the turntable, one of the last times you're going to see it. So they did not have to go down 150, 200 feet. But they had to go down well below the 9-foot channel. Maybe they had to take all the materials out down to 30, 40 feet, whatever. But it was nothing. They did not have to go down to the bedrock of the river, which was a good thing. And then probably these other ones, not so much, because this is still the river channel. Is this 21? I'm on 25. Okay, it's almost done. You can see there's not much left of the turntable. The crash barrier looks like it got crashed into it. Okay, so the bridge was 1,661 feet long. It's about a third of a mile. The swing span was 442 feet. The deck was 18 feet. It was all built before cars. Spans 3 and 4 are still there. And here's how you get there. That's what's left of the original bridge. There's a span in front of 3. That would be where 2 and that's where 1 and 2 rested on. There's one of the east abutments of 3 and 4. Let's see where we are here now, 29. Okay, this is the east abutment on the bridge. And when this was a road deck, remember the rail bridge is up at the top here. I'm going to use this red thing for the first time. That's where the rails were. Here's where the cars went. You couldn't take a big truck across the thing either. No way. But anyway, like I said, you went left into Newport, right into St. Paul Park. A few people coming home from the King of Diamonds or Dukes or O'Neill's would crash straight into it. Headlights on and everything, you know. But it was a solid, those are all protecting this limestone and stuff. There's a signal, I'm on 30 here. That's a signal controller. This is on the Inver Grove on the west side. There's a wide track, and the switch was right before or after it, because I told you the driving road had to go north or south on our side of the river. The trains had to go east or west here. The trains on the other side of the river, they curved around and went north into Newport. But anyway, I was up here with one of my grandkids maybe in the 2000s, and you could still swing that rail over with a hand switch. It was a hand switch. Those were the days when you had cabooses. Now they just have a red light on the back of trains. There's no switching anymore on those. Okay. There's a new span. Here's another interesting story for you. During Jimmy Carter's presidency, 1979, he decided he wanted to go down the Mississippi Queen, St. Paul or St. Louis or New Orleans. I don't know where him and Roslyn ended up, but it was pretty neat to watch. And I worked in the cat cracker here. You weren't supposed to leave your unit, but you could sneak a couple 100 feet out of there. They could toot you if they needed you. And we just watched it the whole night. And first they sent down a bunch of speedboats with lights on them. And they're doing the shorelines. They're doing the islands. They kicked everybody off the bridge and opened it up so no trains could go across it 3-4 hours. I was up on the cat hoppers. That thing looked like it took about 20 seconds to go by. It just motored. But I think they had a good trip. But it was just kind of neat that we had a celebrity like him go down that river. So here's the construction of the new piers. So after tearing out 1 and 2, which they could have kept for nothing, they tore it out. They hauled that one away. They tore that one down in place. They put them on the same piers that they had them. And they're smaller. It's not going to carry traffic anymore, but it's a pedestrian thing now. And they're so small you can almost slide those inside the originals. 33. Here's a new span. They put the years on it that it sat there, 1894 to 2010. And barriers there so nobody tries to take a car across it. And of course, in the old days when we had the bridge, when those little gates shut, heck, a kid could drive a bike through there and, they wouldn't have held a car back. No way. A kid on a good bike could have plowed into them. So that was restored by the Dakota County and Inver Grove people. You can see there how much smaller it is than the old structure. But anybody who's been across it here, that thing always looked old. It always looked rusty. Yeah.
I've been across it before.
Yeah.
It actually just a little bit that interested me. I was the engineer that did the Inver Grove Heights.
Neat.
The bridge.
Which company were you working for?
Short Elliott Erickson.
Okay. You never knew Bud Hanner, did you?
No.
Okay. I got a story about him coming. Okay, so, and this is on the Inver Grove side. You got to drive over there. You got to drive over by Cameron's and King of Diamonds. But this is that piece from the bridge. That's all an original piece from it. Here's the gear in the shaft. And there you can see the gear there in the wintertime. And of course, that one's looking towards us on the Inver Grove side. This is looking towards that hill in Inver Grove. But this was their big gear and the gear reduction. So it didn't take much of a motor and it moved really slow, but it wasn't a bit, you never heard the motor, never made much noise. So this is a rock, probably at the height of its years. You can see it was called Chicago Rock Island and Pacific, whatever. Anyway, here you can see Chicago, the Twin Cities. I can see St. Louis. I saw Memphis. It got out to the coast. It went up to LA and San Diego. Got really close to, it went to Denver, stuff, Omaha, Kansas City. So it got around. It got out to South Dakota. All these other lines are the lines of other companies. There's a great picture. That's one of the more modern logos of the Rock Island that are like that on it. And that is, I don't know which end of I don't even see the 1894 on it. There's their logo, the route of the rocket, 1852 to 1980. I told you about focus and resolution. Anybody know what that one's carrying? You've all been there probably. Huh? Royal American shows, the Midway. The State Fair's Midway is on that train. Okay, and I worked in the CAT unit. Anybody's ever been by there? The control room was that glass paneling. It was all glass, big glass windows. You could sit anything, you could be noisy as heck and see everything. And it'd go by. And the first was all the machinery and stuff of all the rides and stuff. Then like the back dozen cars would be all the carnies and stuff. It was just great. I witnessed it twice going across there. Feel pretty lucky for that. Then that's a fire. When they were working to get the new spans put on, the torches lit it on fire. They were cutting steel. So it lit. Okay, but fires were nothing new to that bridge. Here's an old World War II vet. His name was Lee Hanner. He went by Bud Hanner. Okay? He belonged to our society. He worked for them guys. The first time he talked till about the early 50s. That's when I was born. He worked there till 1980. So we had to have him back a second time. But Bud came, good World War II vet. And he did three things that are distinct to that bridge. He took a train across one time that was on fire. He came across another time when the bridge itself was on fire. And he took the last train across. So they had a small train that came in, and he didn't know if they'd be what was going on because he knew the bankruptcy was coming. So he gets in the yard. There's no signals. He's got nowhere to go. And a guy comes out of Duke's Tavern, Bud says, "Where do I park this thing?" He says, "The place got sold. The party's at Duke's." And that's the last day he worked. But he was a great guy. He came. He had everybody laughing. He was so good. Okay. There you can see more of the fire. You can see they're fighting from the new part and the old parts to try and get that fire out. If you want to see a bridge like it, kind of like it, because it doesn't have a car deck, our bridge was very unique. Can anybody name me another bridge like that had a car deck and a rail deck? You know of one?
Bridge up at Operation.
Oh, yeah.
It's got a rail on the top, see
Okay. There might be a few of them. Yeah.
Approach you zigzag in to get underneath the rail.
Oh, yeah.
You can have the experience between the top of your.
Yeah. Not to make a kid get scared.
No longer swing.
Yeah. The closest thing I can think would be there's an old bridge in Savage. I think a Google map is still there, but it's swung open. And it has one rail line, goes into Bloomington, and the other one is a passenger for a car. But it's one line each, one car and one train.
Still there, but still swings. So as he approaches it,
They really modernized, haven't they? Gosh, that's good. Yeah. Okay, so this happened at the north end of South St. Paul. It's a bridge that's 15, 20 years older than the swing bridge and the old bridge. And this happened, I think I got the year there, 1912. And it comes into South St. Paul. Of course, this bridge, not this bridge, but the bridge they built in its place. That's all owned by Union Pacific now. They got up here into our part into Minnesota and stuff when Chicago Northwestern and a few others bankrupted to them. Otherwise, Union Pacific did not have didn't have a presence up here. And we'll see them on our main lines through Cottage Grove and Newport, but they're leasing those tracks from either CP or BN. And CP was the original Milwaukee Road. So in this, the railman here, he came across, and the guy was sounding the thing. The guy didn't hear good. He just spilled right over. The engineer was killed, and a number of hogs, cattle, and sheep. The tragedy. So that's how that bridge looks today, pretty much. You can see the crash barriers. They're not just wood that come out here. I think it's concrete, and this is corrugated steel on both ends. Just to give you a little placement here, up there is the St. Paul Airport, and back here a couple miles would be the stockyards. And it comes through along Concord Street, curves across that bridge, curves again, goes alongside the Metropolitan, the big sewage plant over there, then into the big yard in St. Paul. So besides the bridge, there's one thing left. And I can't make it much bigger, but here you can see the bridge. This is just a blue line showing lengths, but this is our far side of the river. And here you can see the two old spans, the two newer ones. But up here, you can see it's under construction. They're building a little park and they're calling it Roundhouse Square or something. So what I want to say is there's nothing really that we could do if we wanted to save any part of this end. There was nothing we could do because of 9/11. And TSA changed everything. In the refinery, we had to put up fences where there weren't fences, put up cameras where there weren't, put up lights where there weren't, and part of our property went north of there. So the federal government would not allow. You can't even walk there. you're on refinery property, you'd be escorted or arrested. So, kind of a sad ending. You know, they could have had those 4 pieces there if they'd have waited another week. They couldn't. So, does anybody have any questions? Anything I haven't covered? Please ask. Okay, I'll give you a little bit of talk about them. So I mentioned these magazines. This is our rival. This is Dakota County. But they did a whole book on railroads of the county, and this one did it on crossings. So all our bridges, railroad or cars, are on here. And then John Cartwright, he has a booth out at the State Fair every year in the northwest corner, and he draws these. And this is a drawing. These are just a couple of the little places near the old swing bridge. And they're all 3 on our side of the river. This is the old switch with the Chicago, Burlington, Quincy, and the Milwaukee Road. This lies between the Hastings Lock and Dam and the Highway 61 bridge. Okay, and the Y, there go the BN, Chicago, Burlington, which is BN today, and here's the Canadian Pacific today. Going that way, I told a few of you that switching today, the switching for those, not anything like that. A guy sitting in front of a big board, kind of like watching airplanes. It's in Fort Worth, Texas. When they combine with Santa Fe, all that, the controlling of all our switching up here of BN lines is in Fort Worth. This is on Broadway in St. Paul Park, so that you just jog over and then you're on pass with the going to the old bridge when the road was public at that time. This still is, but this is gone. This is just a stop place. It's not like a depot. You know, that's a switch house. This is just a tiny little depot. And then this here is a switch. And if you remember going along Highway 61 and seeing a switch house in Newport. Okay, that's where this was. It was up by the tracks. Okay, they wanted to expand the tracks and stuff. So they took this out, but they kept it intact. And they moved it back a block or 2 right by their city hall. So when they got in there, like the lines going to the old bridge, they were already gone. And they'd pulled a lot of them handles out or moved them in where handles broke. They got their full complement of handles in this thing. Where do you think they got the other ones from? Got them from that one, right there. So they were right down there when those went. But it was the same company. Chicago, Burlington, Quincy, which became the Great Northern, the Northern Pacific, and became Burlington Northern, Santa Fe. There's more genealogy in them railroads than we have. You know? So, any questions? I'm up close here. I worked at that refinery, so I'm a little bit hard of hearing. Yeah.
You mentioned you were in the cat cracker?
Cat cracker.
Cat cracker.
Catalyst
What is
cracker.
that now?
It had rotating catalyst in it. Okay, and the oil met it. 1,300 degrees, the oil is 600 something. And this catalyst looks like dark rock polish. Okay, and the whole thing turns into a vapor when it meets, and that's what carries it up 60, 70 feet to the reactor itself. And in the reactor, it pulls carbon molecules off the oil. So if it's pulling off carbon molecules, that catalyst is like black. Okay, so then the catalyst goes off the side and back into the regenerator. And you pump air in there, copious amounts of air. And that burns it off so it can go through again. So that goes in a big circle. There's 3 slide bells that control all that. And from the top of the reactor, all them vapors go into a main column, and the heavy oils get separated out. Then the gasoline, the butanes, the propanes, the kerosenes. It's kind of like a fractionator after the fractionators of the crude unit. But it's very sophisticated. If you go to any of them other units, you can lose power there for 5-10 minutes, and power comes on, you go around and turn everything on. If that shuts off for a second or 2, you run as fast as you can. Because it can, you can get reversals in that. If that oil gets down into the regenerator, it can blow up. Never has, but it's come close. One of my chiefs told me, if you ever saw the inside of that regenerator, you'd go down and punch out and quit. So I didn't want to know what it looked like. But, they're all kind of tied into each other. And they would still push trains for switching at the refinery. We get in butane we get in isobutane, we export normal butane, and we bring in alcohol gets unloaded. We load asphalts that go out, heavy fuel oil. So sometimes they'll park them there, and it's above the parking lot. One time, they must have hit the buckle too hard. It's a stop buckle. Otherwise, it would go into the river. And one of them cars came off and just crushed 3 pickups. And my old neighbor who worked down there, Denny Pelkey, he was in tears. His pickup was 6 months old. He had insurance. Good question. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thanks. Yeah, you can come up here and get a closer look at any of this stuff.
Are there any videos of the bridge swinging?
I've never seen any, but there's plenty of pictures. Now, the majority of these pictures came from a rail fan. And they are railroad company fans. You hear about them. You can go online and look. But his name was John Weeks. Some of them I've taken pictures of. I have a few of them. And some of them are just out there, you know. So don't credit me with any of them pictures. Somebody else's hard.
Interesting. Quite a bridge fanatic and photographed almost everything in the Midwest.
Oh,
He's got a website. If you just go to John Weeks,
okay.
he's got great pictures that he's taken and a lot of research on all of these older bridges.
Yeah.
It's good historical
Yeah.
document.
When I look him up, I don't know what else he has time for. Very good. So what's your experience? You live around there?
Stillwater, member of
Okay. Okay.
the society here.
Okay. Good.
I just drove by and I saw the sign
Oh.
in front.
Oh, good.
A few minutes later, I wanted to
Yeah.
see what you had on the bridge because I was quite involved in it, in the saving of the bridge and,
Yeah.
and making it useful
Yeah.
as a pedestrian pier.
Yeah. Ask him about it sometime. Just say, how did they let them first 2 spans go?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about it if you want to know.
Go ahead.
Well, the bridge had gone into foreclosure.
Yeah.
State took possession of it. And so it sat out there without an owner other than
Uh-huh.
became a liability with kids out there.
Yes.
There was a band, Husker Du, maybe some people recognize the name. They were out there at the album cover.
I've got that album.
Bridge.
Yeah. Grant Hart graduated from South St. Paul.
Yeah, and you tell by the graffiti, everybody would party out there. So it became a liability. The condition was getting questionable. And so Dakota County, that's on the,
Opposite side from us.
took the position, well, we're just gonna tear this thing down because of the liability.
Mm-hmm.
And so they took the swing down, the approaches from the east side and took the approaches on the west so that you couldn't get out.
Oh, get to it. Yeah. They
And then
started
they
with.
left
yeah.
what was there because it wasn't accessible anyway.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the navigation.
Yeah.
And after that happened, 2008, the economy was such that the federal government had a lot of stimulus money, and the city of Inver Grove Heights saw potential as part of their bike trail that goes along the
Mhm.
west side of the river all
Yeah.
the way down. And the
Yeah.
stopping point is a pier and an interpretive out to the river.
Yeah.
And so they pursued funds. They put in an application. They got about $2 million that they didn't expect to get.
Mm-hmm.
But technically, they didn't really deserve it because they didn't own the bridge. They
Yeah.
lied a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But part of it is you have to have ownership of the
Yeah.
bridge by a public entity. And so there was a scramble at the courthouse. We had the local legislators assist and city attorneys and worked with the governor and got it out of the state's foreclosure and into the possession of the city of Inver Grove Heights.
Okay.
So then they could proceed with
Bit-
doing
bit-
the 2 new spans.
putting them pieces
on
in,
there
yeah.
and then doing the repair.
Well, neat. Yeah.
And it wasn't on the National Register and it wasn't eligible either because the swing was gone. That was
Well,
the
yeah.
contributing element.
Mm-hmm.
And with only the parts remained, we had some freedoms there to accelerate the project and part of how we went about it, but we didn't clean the graffiti off. We didn't paint the bridge. That was all interpretive. We're going to leave the original wooden deck.
Mhm.
The railings were in poor condition, but we replicated it out of galvanized steel with the
Okay.
same patterns,
Yeah.
the code heights
Mhm. Yeah.
and requirements. So it looks a lot like the old wood
Yeah.
railings.
Yeah.
And then we did a similar boxes on the approach, but a little different so that it was obvious this was new. This was
Mhm.
old. Still a 12 by 12, real airy, open feeling and kind of the same
Yeah.
food truss design.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing you talk about when they removed the spans, they came into the barge to lift and move them out. We did the same thing. We put those new ones in.
Oh,
We set 'em
Came-
out on
they were already
barges
made.
in St. Paul and brought
Okay.
them out on
Neat.
a barge.
Yeah.
or-
Yeah.
And erected them.
Yeah.
in there.
Makes sense. A lot easier to work in a safe environment like that.
That
Like you
gets a
do
lot.
work there, you can start fires.
Well,
As you can see.
the fire, we're just about done with it, a week before opening it to the public.
Yeah.
And making some attachments to the side of the bridge there for the
Mm-hmm.
railing. And when they would drill into the timber, they often hit a spike that held the deck down.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get through, so this one guy with the welding torch, well, he just
Oh,
go in
yeah.
that hole and burn that little bit of a spike down. But that creosote and lumber
Oh, yeah.
ignited. And we had the St. Paul fire boats down there, we had the DNR helicopter
Yeah.
with water bags.
Mhm.
It was quite a
Yeah.
deal to
Yeah.
save it, and we did lose the old timber deck,
Uh-huh.
but the contractor's negligence and his insurance company paid for a
Oh.
brand new timber deck, which
Oh, okay.
was actually a betterment from. what we
Yes.
had before.
Yeah.
So it all had new deck, two bridge
Yeah.
spans as well as.
Imagine how old that creosote was in them.
Yep.
And it dripped.
Yeah.
You know, the Ericksons used to own that refinery. They were the first owners. You ever heard of them?
Yep, Erickson and Ashland, and Marathon.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is.
And the rest of them. But anyway, Hillard Gustafson he married an Erickson's wife, or sister, but he was an alcoholic. He had liquid lunch over at O'Neill's every lunch hour. He had a brand new Torino one time, tan colored, got a big creosote, so everybody knew where he went for lunch. But he was ticked off.
But it is an interesting bridge.
Yeah.
Here that go over there on the Inver Grove side and walk out on it
Yeah.
on a nice day. Gets a lot of attention and a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
traffic out on it.
And think back in them days. If you lived in Inver Grove and had a friend in St. Paul Park, you either had to go down to Hastings or the Robert Street Bridge. There was no 494, no Lafayette Bridge.
I crossed it as a kid on my bicycle, and then I would cross it when 494 was backed up.
Oh,
To
yeah.
get back to Stillwater, I'd pay
Yeah.
me 75 cents.
Yeah.
Cross on a swing bridge.
Mhm. You could get tokens for it. If you wanted to get 10 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good info there. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Herb.
Yeah.